You deserve the conversation. And it's a very nuanced conversation. And I will say that hormones, they are optimizers. Like, you're not going to out hormone your insulin resistance. And you know what I'm saying? Or a sedentary lifestyle, or really, really crappy sleep. I'm also not a fan of doctors saying that you need to do all the lifestyle interventions before you should be allowed to use hormone replacement therapy. What if someone is struggling so much that they just can't, implement some of those strategies, and then you give them some hormones, and we deserve wins. We deserve quick wins. We deserve as many wins as we can get.
It isn't about being perfect. It's about being better. Hello, my name is Dr. Stephanie Estima, and I host expert discussions with thought leaders in all facets of health, including nutrition, fitness, hormones, stress management, performance, recovery, longevity, health span, and energy production. On this show, we discuss complex science, but then we also alchemize it into actionable, everyday living. The ultimate goal with the show is to assist you in making informed decisions about your health and to catapult you into being the hero in your own life. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of Better with Dr. Stephanie. It's me, your host, Dr. Stephanie Estima. Today, I am joined with Dr. Mariza Snyder. She is a functional practitioner, a women's hormone expert, and the author of 8 books, including the #1 national best-selling book, The Essential Oils Hormone Solution. Of course, Dr. Mariza focuses on hormones and essential oils and metabolic health, and that is exactly what we talked about today. In our conversation, we talked about what her perimenopausal journey and what some of the hiccups have been on the way. We talk about an upward spiral and some downward spirals as well. We certainly get into, a little later in the conversation, we get really deep into hormones. So we were talking about progesterone, like oral micronized progesterone versus synthetic progestin, the differences between the two, dosages. We talk about estradiol, when to take it, how to take it. We talk about testosterone, when to take it, how to take it. And then during our conversation, we also talked a lot about migraines. So many women experience menstrual cycle related migraines. So we were talking about the different qualities of those, what they might look like, and then some ways that we can help. We talked about blood sugar regulation. We talked about sugar parameters. So if you're wearing something like a continuous glucose monitor, the lower end, the upper end, lots and lots and lots of actionable items in this conversation. And I hope that it comes through that we are also friends as well as colleagues, lots of joking around, as you often do when you are in the company of your friends. So please enjoy my conversation with Dr. Mariza Snyder. All right. Welcome to the Better Show, my dear friend Mariza. Welcome back. Three-peat. This is your third time, I believe, on the show.
Yes, I was literally just memoing one of my soul sisters, and I was telling them how I was preparing for you, how much I love you, how you were a soul sister to me. And I was like, this is my third time on the show. Yeah. And I just feel so deeply grateful for that.
Oh, well, I love any chance we ever get to connect, always time well invested. And we were chatting on Instagram. I can't remember where the conversation, we always are chatting on Instagram, but we were talking about, I was on your menopausal and perimenopausal summit recently, and I said, you know what, you should be back on the show and talk about some of the things that I just love that you're talking about on social media. Let's maybe start with mindset, because this is the M word that nobody wants to talk about. we all want the nutrition, we all want the muscle, we all want that stuff. No one wants to talk about mindset. So one of the things that I really love about what you're talking about is finding joy. And you just used this word right before we got started, this recalibration. So talk to us a little bit about, and maybe update us about your story, because you haven't been on the show since, and you've had a couple of pretty big life events happen, and then maybe integrate how you have been, your emotional landscape in perimenopause has been.
Yeah. Mindset. Woo. It's the #1. It's, if you're going to anchor to something, it's going to be that. And let me tell you, the whirlwind roller coaster ride that I've been on since, I would say, May of 2023, so a little over a year and a half ago, that is the thing that I have anchored to, that in awe and wonder and joy. As you know, I have a little almost 4-year-old, and we are, it's literally magic every day. Also,
how is he 4, first of all? How is he almost 4? Like, blink. Okay.
Yeah, I know. It's so crazy. Yeah. I thought the same thing. And when you look through the eyes of, any little toddler or preschooler or child, especially young children, life is about awe and wonder and play. And man, do they have some fierce boundaries. Like there's so much that we can learn about 4 and 3-year-olds, especially having a sleep routine. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot. And so I'm always, anytime and as being a mom of a preschooler, you're really in the mundane of a lot every single day. There's, morning routines, evening routines. It's just the mom energy. Well, I don't care if you're a CEO of whatever. You have a young child. You're in that too. And there's a lot of that mundane, whether it's folding laundry or putting stuff away, or, now we're decorating for the holidays. And I always try to anchor back into being in the joy of the mundane, in the joy of the little things that happen throughout the day, because really our life is just made up of a lot of that as well and how do we want to traverse the experience of life throughout those days, especially when things can get a little challenging in the perimenopausal experience in midlife for many of us. And so if I wanted to rewind, so I'm always living in that continuum of every day, how can I be in the awe and wonder of life? And how can I be in gratitude and appreciation? And I'm constantly anchoring myself into that. The other thing that I'm always anchoring myself in, and I'm always telling women to anchor themselves in, is to who you want to be or who you are going to become. And so I'm very clear on who I am, like my North Star, my future self, what I like to call my vision self. And as long as I can anchor to her, and knowing that I'm already her and that I'm just taking the steps every day, moving in the direction towards her, that I'm really going to come out on the other side with that level of freedom and power and strength and resilience. And so if I can just anchor to that future version of myself who is kicking butt and taking names, then I can just implement those steps to get to her. So those are the two things I like to play with every single day regarding mindset, because there are some hard days. I mean, I'll tell you, I was so grateful that our interview today was today versus yesterday, because my estradiol was like, she was still trying to come up into the world. We got back into the system. She wasn't sure if she's going to show up. Am I coming back? And sometimes I would wonder if is she coming back? And so I was day 4 of my cycle yesterday, and I was like day 5. That's when I start to turn the corner again. And so I was really holding the vision.
You're holding space for her to arrive.
I'm like, come on, girl, day 5, let's go.
I love that. Well, I love what you're saying too around, nobody wants to hear this, but I'll tell you that the way that you're going to be successful on any program, any diet, any lifting program, any movement program, is to really understand this piece. Like nobody wants to talk about mindset, but everybody needs it, right? Everybody needs the recalibration, or they need to have that foundation of their why and their purpose. So for you, it's like, okay, this is my future self. She's kicking butt. She's taking names. She's everything that is important. She's doing all the things that I deem important. In order for you to be doing that, you really do have to understand what it is that you want to be doing, right? So what are the kicking butt and taking names? Like what are the specifics there? And then really when things do get rough, like or when it's just the mundane, it's the monotony of the laundry and the cleaning up after dinner and all the other things that happen. Right now, I'm in my soccer mom era. So it's a lot of driving to soccer, hanging out at the game, and then coming back. So that takes up a lot of my evenings. And I'm trying to also, like you, stay in gratitude for that, because sometimes we have, like my kids and I will have the best conversations when they're in the back seat, tired after a game, or there's a lesson to be learned from the loss, or whatever it is. So that joy of the mundane, or that I actually talk a little about it a little bit differently. I also will just say like surrender to the monotony, which is kind of the same thing that you're saying, because that is, to your point, it's a lot of what life is. It's a lot of like wake up, brush your teeth, hit the gym, eat, sleep, repeat, right? And then all the other sort of nuances that come in there. So I really love that you're bringing that to the forefront.
Yeah, if we can embrace that, I think it's a surrender. And then how do we up level that surrender into, I can find magic in this as well. Then I feel like we're really winning the game of life. If we can keep into that mindset. And I get that in perimenopause, I don't know if there's ever going to be a time, unless there's a major illness or a major situation that happens with a family member where you're really thrown into a major stressful situation, I would have to say the transitional period, the transitional period of perimenopause is so profound. But life doesn't stop because your brain is changing dramatically or your body is changing dramatically. And so anchoring to those pieces, and whether it's mindset or it's joy or it's gratitude or all three, I'll anchor to anything to get me through the day some days and to get me through feeling good in my body as best as I can.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, for me at least, if there's a time when I'm irritated with or, mad at my partner, and I think immediately of something that I'm grateful for that he does for me, or that I just in terms of who he is as a human being, it's very difficult for me to continue being angry with him. So it's almost like you can't be in drive and reverse at the same time. It's like you can't be in gratitude and like rage at the same time either, right? When you're like, okay, so he like wakes up and he makes me this beautiful coffee and he makes her, so you're like, all right. Like, can I just bring down, maybe it's perimenopausal rage, probably is perimenopausal rage. Can I bring this down, a step or two?
Yeah, I had a moment like that this morning where a couple things. I woke up super early to prepare for our interview. I woke up at like 5:45 and I expected my son to sleep until like 7:15, 7:30. And he came into the room at 6:15 and I was like, oh, hell no. And I was like, what's going on? What are you doing up? And he's like, well, I knew you were up. I was like, okay. Okay, so all of a sudden, whatever I thought my morning was going to be, it didn't end up being that way. And ultimately had a lot of time to get him ready for school and prepped. But then, I'm still trying to prepare for this interview. And my husband, Alex, is a night owl and kind of running late in the morning. And it was his job to get my son to school this morning. And, it's like literally 7 minutes or it's 5 minutes to when they need to be in the car. My son, by the way, is ready. Everything is ready. The backpack, the lunchbox, his clothes, the whole nine, but my husband is not. He's not ready. And so they actually were still late to school. And I was like, when do I let this go? Like, it's not my monkey at this point, but also I worked so darn hard to get this child ready. And at the last, like the final buzzer moment, at the end of the day, he was still late. But Alex made coffee for me. He made everybody breakfast. He helped with lunches. And so instead of getting caught up in that, I did have some choice words. I'm not going to pretend like I didn't. But
Don't we all?
Exactly. Because I was like, man, like mama. And I was like, you know what? I did my part. I did the thing I was supposed to do. But I like when my son's on time. I like to be on time as well. But I let it go. And then I was like, okay, I could be stuck in this. Or I could really be in gratitude of all the things that Alex had done that morning. Kingston was still relatively on time-ish. Yes. The group hadn't left their little drop-off area yet. And so, yes, you can easily go into the spiral of like how it's not working out for you, or you can absolutely reframe of like what went right. And I also, it took me, what ends up spiraling, because you can either spiral downward or you can spiral upward, right? You can spiral into all the things that are not working out for you, or you spiral into all the things that are working out for you. And I will say that over the weekend, I had a 3-day migraine, usually the first couple of days of my period. And it was what I call a sit your butt down migraine, like the one that just don't stop, won't stop. And Alex really took on a lot of the brunt of nighttime routines and a lot of things because I just didn't have the brain capacity to do it. And so as I was thinking about all the things my husband did this morning, I was like, wow, actually, he held so much space for me throughout the weekend when I was really struggling with a lot of brain-related migraine symptoms. I have a syndrome of symptoms that happened to me when my migraines hit. And so I ended up spiraling in an upward direction in terms of all the things that really went right for me in regards to support, particularly the level of support I've needed in this perimenopausal journey.
So that would be an example, that 3-day migraine, of maybe a downward spiral, right? Mm-hmm. So we can upward spiral and we can downward spiral. And I thought maybe I actually wanted to double click a little bit on migraines around the time of bleed week. So either a lot of women will experience migraines leading up to, and then many women, such as yourself, will experience a lot of migraines and headaches on their bleed. So as they start their periods. So can you talk to us a little bit about what is happening there from a hormonal perspective? Certainly, we were just saying we were holding space for estradiol to show up. So talk to us a little bit about what is happening from a hormonal milieu perspective in terms of why a migraine might happen. Because you're not the one thing I can tell you is you're not the only one. I mean, you know this as well, but you're not the only one who experiences this.
Absolutely. So when it comes to migraines, and anyone who's listening, if you have migraines, particularly hormone-related migraines, I'm just sending so much extra love to you. I understand fully how debilitating it's the third biggest debilitating neurological disorder that you can have or condition. So it's very extreme for so many of us. And for some of us, they're chronic, and a lot of the research that I've looked into over the years, because at one point I had a migraine practice. And in the sense that it's a very progressive disorder, meaning if it's not treated with medication or drugs, it can spiral out of control. And for me, my migraine started when I was 7 years old. I was abused. I had a lot of head trauma. And I think that was part of the reason why my migraine started. So well before my hormones were online, I was struggling with them. But then as my hormones came online, they very much, one of the triggers for my migraines was always right the day of my period or the day before my period, with that drop in estradiol. And so when we look at the research and we're trying to correlate, well, what's going on here? And this can happen to women. I'll have them right after ovulation as well.
Right. I was going to say, yeah.
So some of us will have them right after ovulation with that drop. Now that drop isn't as extreme as that one leading into your period. So between day 27, maybe 26, 27, 28 to day 1. But I get them at both ovulation and right before my period, especially in perimenopause. But when they came into full view for me was when I was pregnant. And I was so worried about taking migraine medication or Excedrin migraine during my pregnancy. I already felt like, because I was 41, I had an autoimmune condition. I already felt like the deck was stacked against me in some ways in terms of creating a really healthy embryo and healthy baby. And so I actually avoided a lot of migraine medication. And one of the caveats of research shares that if you aren't treating migraines, they can progressively get worse over time. And so I think I ended up kind of shooting myself in the foot as I was kind of sacrificing for not taking medication while I was pregnant, that I let them spiral out of control. I think I had over 100 migraines during my pregnancy.
And what were your symptoms? Were they classic? Tell us a little bit about the symptoms of your particular scenario.
Yeah, so I don't have migraines with aura very often. So auras can be the light sensations, the spots, nausea, severe nausea, kind of those symptoms that can come on pretty strongly before the actual migraine comes on. For me, it's a lot of tightness. It's cervicogenic, always in the neck, C1, C2, occipital, and then it's unilateral. It's always the left side. Always, ever since I was a little girl, it's always been my left side. And then it becomes, usually I try to knock it out. I always try to knock it out before it becomes something serious. And there are days where it's a little trickier to know versus others. Usually takes about an hour to 3 hours for the migraine to mature in me. And I think for some people, it can be a matter of minutes, but usually about an hour or so where the onset of is this a migraine? I always wake up with them, or they come on in the early morning for me. And then they take over into the left. It feels like literally an ice pick through my left eye. I usually knock it out with some type of medication, usually Excedrin migraine or like Nurtec, or there's a couple other meds that I've been trying, because there's been a point after the concussions last summer that I've averaged 10 plus migraines a month. So,
Mariza.
Yeah. So it's interesting.
The ice pick behind the eye, though, that's like cluster headache. That's like the DDX. In my head, I have my differential diagnosis already. I'm like, ice pick behind the eye, cluster headaches. So that also may be, I don't know, cervicogenic for sure, but also potentially if you can't feel you just feel like someone's attacking your eye.
Yeah, and that can also be cluster headache too, but definitely the distribution from occipital all the way through. Usually it lands in the eye on one side. It can be left or right for anybody. It's rarely bilateral. It's rarely both. And then it feels like someone just scrambles my brain. So let's say I manage it with the drugs, for the rest of the day, I'm scrambled. I just can barely function in life. And some days are worse than others, especially if again, I have different ones. Some of these migraines that I have are not hormone related, but what I call the you better sit down migraines, like you better cancel life.
Yeah.
Those are the ones right at my period. So, and some days it's only one. I often get a migraine hangover the next day. So I'm still just discombobulated and not fully functional. But just, again, it feels like a hangover without alcohol or like really poor sleep. Like you're just barely kind of getting by. But this particular weekend, this particular cycle, it would not go away for 3 days in a row. And then the fourth day was a migraine hangover. So I just had barely recovered 2 days ago.
And have you ever triangulated either with yourself or with your patients or the community that you serve when we are talking about, and I know we've sort of, I said before we started, we're going to veer off into all these different directions. So here we are in migraine land.
Yeah.
But do you ever correlate it or triangulate it or triage it with stress? Like if it's like you and I talk about this idea that the menstrual cycle is like our fifth vital sign. Yes. It's your hormonal report card that you get every month for like how well you manage physical, chemical, emotional stress in the last month. Do you find that your migraines are better than, worse than if those three verticals have not been attended to?
Absolutely. Yes. Stress is a major component for how severe my migraines are. But I will say perimenopause in its own right has been its own independent risk factor. Because I have been more stressed than I am today with far less migraines. Also, I would say post-concussion syndrome didn't help me either. So for me, I mean, every single one of us were coming in with a very individual experience, whether it's migraines or whatever chronic condition. I always say very few of us come into perimenopause unscathed. And I came into perimenopause with migraines. And then I got hit in the head a couple times and that didn't help. So I had a couple of these independent risk factors that kind of set me up for, I mean, I never hoped to have this many consistently across the board, but that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
Yeah, I actually remember almost to the day because I had released a podcast on concussions. I had a friend on who was telling us his concussion story. And then you were like, oh, this is perfect timing. I'm like, and then we were talking, I was like, what are you talking about? And then you were telling me all about what had happened. So just for context, tell us a little bit about what happened. I guess it would be last June. Okay, so tell us what happened. And then I would love to talk about the impact. I want to talk about perimenopause and brain function, which I think this is a really nice segue for.
Absolutely. So I didn't realize I was in the throes of perimenopause earlier that year. I started 2023 resilient. I was working out multiple times a day. My metabolic health was super dialed, and I ended up hiring one of Dr. Gabrielle's personal trainers here locally. And he is a CrossFit trainer. And I had never really done CrossFit. I also have Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And anyway, ultimately, I burned myself to the ground. As I'm recovering from that, I thought it was Haji's. I was breastfeeding still. There was a lot of things that I was still kind of putting to the wayside because I was tending to my son. He was almost 2.5 years old. But I had done all this training. I was box jumping really high. And we were at a playground in June, very early June that year. And I was helping my son up a little stair ladder. It was a metal stair ladder. I had a hat on. It was my queen bee hat that I always wear if you ever see me.
We have the same hat, by the way. We have the same hat. I have that hat too. Yeah.
And I was helping him up this little ladder. It was metal. And he got up to the top and any 2-year-old would love, he wanted his mama to go down the slide with him. So I decided that I was going to box jump this ladder up to the very top. I was like 1.5 feet maybe. And I grabbed the rail and I propelled myself up. And what I didn't know is 1.5 feet above me was a metal bar across this ladder. And I propelled right into this metal bar and pretty much almost fell down the stairs.
Hit the front, your forehead?
Yeah, I hit my forehead right here at the very top. I just didn't see it. I didn't know it was there. So that was concussion number one for me. I almost blacked out there, but as a renegade mother as I am, I wheeled myself back up those stairs, girl, and I went down the slide with my son. Okay. And then 2 weeks later, and so I kind of early concussion types. And again, I was already having some other stuff going on that felt very like Hashimoto's type of symptoms, low thyroid function.
Tell me
so
exactly
brain fog, low energy. So those types of symptoms, I would say those are the big ones. You get mood changes, but mostly brain fog and low energy. Like I just had no resilience. I had no stress tolerance. And so when I got hit in the head the first time, I kind of just brushed it off as we always do. I think women are just taught to kind of normalize whatever they're going through. And it kind of just felt similar to what I had been dealing with. But then 2 weeks later, I got my son and I were playing in the living room, and he headbutts me and pretty much almost breaks my nose. Like it goes black and blue, and it takes me a minute to recalibrate. But those back-to-back hits of the head spiraled me. I had 14 days of migraines back to back every single day until I finally had to go to the ER and do a CT scan. And that's when I was diagnosed with post-concussion syndrome. So by the time that all happened, we were in July. And then I started having really severe symptoms. At that point, I wasn't able to drive my car. I couldn't take a shower. I wasn't able to get my son ready for preschool. I really wasn't able to do a lot of the daily tasks, that the things that we were talking about, kind of the daily mundane things. Yeah. And I definitely couldn't read. I couldn't engage in a conversation like this. I was dealing with severe light sensitivity, constant headaches. I was constantly nauseated. And this went on for weeks on end. I was pretty much in a dark room for about 2 weeks. I initiated a very intense concussion protocol for about 90 days. And I really didn't come onto the other side. Like I didn't start to feel like I could function as a human probably until October of that year of 23.
What was your concussion? Talk to us a little bit about the concussion recovery. But actually, before you do, so you were talking about like couldn't drive the car, couldn't shower, like all the activities of daily living, not able to do, couldn't read. One of the things that I just have a side interest in language. Like I'm just obsessed with language. One of the things that I would note, I saw a lot of concussed patients in practice as well. They would have like consonant confusion, and they would say kitchen instead of chicken. You know, like they would move consonants around in the word, or they were like, I have the word, it's here, I just can't, like it's in Wernicke's area and I can't bring it to my mouth. Did you find that you had any deficits in language? Like did you have trouble finding the words, expressing the words, or even that consonant confusion where you're like switching words around or switching letters around in the word?
No, I would say my long-term memory, so my word recall was obliterated. Like that was what I struggled with the most. And I know that this is a symptom of perimenopause in particular for women.
Yeah, the brain fog.
The brain fog, but even just the lack of word recall, like being in the middle, like having this interview. You know, one of the reasons why I prepped for this interview, I just always want to be ready and prepared. That's just I call it my Virgo nature, whatever. But also, I was telling you earlier, I was telling my husband, I'm like, thank goodness the interview was today and not yesterday or 2 days ago, because I don't know how my brain would have shown up. And so at that particular time, I canceled all interviews. I didn't feel confident. I could not recall information. You could have asked me, what are your top favorite supplements? Or, just like a question I would always know. And I would have gone blank. I didn't have the confidence that I was going to be able to show up the way that I wanted to because of my word recall. And I would say that even into the spring of this year of 24, I still was really struggling with it more consistently than I am now. Like I have a good 5 or 6 days out of the month where I'm like, I don't know how this is going to go. But it was more consistent, especially during the time where I was healing from post-concussion syndrome. I didn't even feel comfortable interviewing people. After interviewing over 1,000 people, I didn't start interviewing people probably until September again. And I would always give every interviewee a disclaimer that I was like, hey, I'm recovering from a post-concussion syndrome. I'm going to do the best I can. I got the questions ready. I feel well researched for you, but just, extra grace in case you find me just not firing the way that I would love, or you notice anything. So I was finding myself, I was coming with a disclaimer stamp.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And so do you find now, one of the tenets of my original book was like cycle your nutrition and cycle your fitness based on where you are in your menstrual cycle. Do you do that now? Do you not necessarily the nutrition and the fitness, but let's say interviews or when you're podcasting, are you now sort of tracking, like you're like, all right, I'm day 4, day 5. So I know that I can interview from day 5 to, day 24. And then after, like, I take a break for a week or two. Like, are you thinking about that now, post-concussed, and then just generally as a way to sort of support your hormonal environment?
Yes, and and it doesn't always play out the way that I want it to. Life happens, rescheduling happens, things happen. And so, like today I was like, okay, I remember reverse engineering because I was getting sick when we were going to talk on Thursday. And I was like, am I a better version of me on Thursday, almost sick? I don't sound great, but my brain is still okay. I'm like, and I looked at my calendar, I looked at my menstrual cycle, and I was like, okay, I will be on day 5. Well, I have come out of that dark window of no estradiol. I even put an extra patch on, girl, because I was like, maybe
I just love everything about you. But one of the things I love most about you is that you are so prepared. It's so wonderful. Okay.
I would say though, I would just really quickly, in terms of work schedule, speaking opportunities, podcasts, I have a webinar tonight too, with I think 2,000 women who are registered to attend. And, we book those dates out like at the beginning of the year is when these dates. And so, in perimenopause, my cycle, although it's technically running around 26 days, girl, what I thought it was going to be back in January is not where it is, now that we are in November. So I do the best I can. I will say where I really pivot is in my day-to-day life. So workouts, how I'm training my body, what I'm eating, what my stress tolerance and resilience is. And throughout my menstrual cycle, I am constantly communicating, not only with my best friends, but particularly with my partner, especially because we are raising such a beautiful light being in this world. And the level of parenting that we do, the highest level is the only level. And so if I'm not able to show up at that level, okay, I've got a lot of buffers in place and a lot of I've planned around how I can navigate me going through perimenopause and ensuring that my son is getting supported with a lot of emotional regulation. So if I don't have it to give, I make sure someone's stepping in to give it.
Yeah, man, raising sons, like I'm right there with you. It's like IQ, of course, but also EQ. Like, can we raise smart and, emotionally intelligent men? That's kind of the goal. So I love to hear you say that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about bioidenticals. You mentioned a patch. Maybe you got an extra one on now. Actually, maybe before we get there, talk to me about, just as a back of the envelope, my audience is very familiar with perimenopause, as you might
imagine.
As you might imagine. But what are some of the things that you have seen, like, as one of the things that clinicians always we are excellent at is pattern recognition. It's like what goes first and then what comes after. And then, so what are some of the changes that you have seen? You can talk about certainly your own experience, but your clients, your community. What are some of the changes that we see in perimenopause? And certainly we'll talk about hormones will be included in that. You can talk about it from a metabolic perspective, from a body composition perspective, from a hormone, like anywhere what are some of the big glaring things that you see time and time again that seem to be in some way or another consistent across women in peri?
Are we talking about early? Are we talking about mid? Are we talking about late?
Let's go the whole journey.
We're talking 10 years, girl. A whole lot can happen.
Let's go early, mid, and then late. Like, what are some of the things that you consistently see in each of those stages?
I would say in early, it is again, if we are normalizing women's, experience, that a lot of things are normal. I think a lot of women don't even know that they're in early perimenopause because it feels like the daily pain points of life, the daily pain points of motherhood. I have one of my best friends is about to be 41, and I could literally in her voice memos, I know when she is in. I know her cycle like nobody's business. So as a soul sister, if you're a soul sister of mine, I know your cycle. So
that's a good friend, by the way. That can we highlight that for a minute? You are a good friend when your friends where they are in their menstrual cycle. Yes. Okay.
And so I knew she was in late luteal, and I can tell, man, she's just getting, a little grouchy, a little, like, you can tell the way she's talking about family. She's more irritated, and she's like, gosh, I don't even know where I'm at. And I'm like, girl, I'll tell you. You're like 2 or 3 days away from your period. Okay. I can tell just by how you're speaking right now where you're at. So if you ever need a barometer for your cycle, I'm there for you. So then I was like, hey, I don't know if you're open to this, but I've noticed that women in their late 30s and early 40s, that even that tiny little drop in progesterone levels can really, again, she's like, okay, I haven't been sleeping. So again, we start listing all these reasons. And I was like, it may benefit you to add a little progesterone to kind of ease some of that out, and so I think it's that decline in progesterone. And I think decline in progesterone levels are actually happening a little bit earlier due to there's nothing conducive to happy hormones living in this modern world. And so what I'm seeing a lot, particularly in symptoms and in a ton of Dutch tests and even serum tests, that even earlier than we may be expecting, we're seeing a little bit lower progesterone levels that show up in less stress tolerance, more irritability, maybe messing with our sleep a little bit. And a little, all of a sudden, what was normal PMS is just a little bit extra PMS. Maybe even before the spotting happens, or maybe even before you start to notice that luteal phase is shortening just a little bit, you may start to notice symptoms. And so for me, it was always symptoms. It was like, oh my gosh, a little bit of brain fog. Sleep is a little bit disrupted, but I'm just irritated, and my stress tolerance, it literally flutters out the door. I watch her go. She's like, bye, I'll see you in about 10 days. And then, as we get into further perimenopause, whether it's mid perimenopause or late perimenopause, all of a sudden I find that we really start to struggle with the brain related symptoms. 8 out of 10 of the most common symptoms of perimenopause are brain related, whether that's a lack of word recall, it's irritability, it's lack of stress tolerance, it's sleep issues, it's vasomotor, like night sweats or hot flashes. All of that's brain derived, or all of that's that connection between that neuroendocrine system that's beginning to get really wonky. Then as we head into mid perimenopause, so I would say where I still want to claim that I'm in early perimenopause. I'm 45. So I'm like right there at the cusp of heading into the direction of mid peri. My cycles are still 26 days, consistently. They used to be 29, then they went to 28 and 27, 26. So I'm still having a regular cycle. So I cycle my hormones, my bioidentical hormones. But what women will start to notice is maybe they're starting to put on a little bit more weight. So metabolically, we become more insulin resistant. Our glucose management isn't as resilient as it used to be. We notice that body composition changes may start to happen. We start to have a little bit more fat accumulation around the belly area versus our butt and thighs. Or maybe we still have that too. Again, estrogen's still there. She's still very much a part of the conversation right now. And then more heightened brain issues. Maybe all of a sudden you're not feeling as productive. You're really struggling to get through the workday. Energy levels are really starting to wane. Sleep is becoming more of an issue. So a lot of these symptoms that felt like, oh, I could just brush them off in early become really more predominant. I find in that mid perimenopause, where we still have a cycle, yet we may be experiencing symptoms of estrogen dominance, more bloating, more heavy periods, more fibrocystic breasts, because as progesterone has definitely been dropping. And then as we get into late, right, we're starting to, we're skipping those periods at least 60 days. That's where we really start to notice maybe the hot flashes, the night sweats come on, maybe where you're dealing with frozen shoulder issues, maybe you were dealing with palpitations, arrhythmia. So more of the estradiol driven symptoms start to come into play, where then women are like, okay, what's going on? Is this menopause? What's going on with me? It's more accentuated brain issues, again, more weight gain. This is really the time where we start to see, I would say this is if there was an intervention window of midlife, it is perimenopause, because that's where we start to see the muscle mass. We don't have the same, I would say, not even cardiovascular resilience, but power and strength. We'll start to notice that we're not able to work out as hard as we used to. We'll notice that our recovery isn't what it used to. We'll notice that, maybe we're struggling with so many symptoms that our motivation to continue to do the things that we know are healthful for us begin to really wane. It just starts to get really hard. Suicidality is at its peak between 47 and 49 years old. So this is where things can get really, really hard to manage. But metabolically is where I see the biggest shift and change, where body composition changes. We're losing muscle mass. Maybe we're losing bone density. And most importantly, we're becoming more insulin resistant in that late perimenopausal transition.
And everything that you just said, you said it in late perimenopause with the menstrual cycle changing, but most of the symptoms happen with a regular menstrual cycle, yes, or somewhat of a regular menstrual cycle, yes, right? And that is such an important point, because I think that people are like, oh yeah, when I miss a month, that means I'm in perimenopause. It's like, I think that you've been in perimenopause for probably 5 or 7 years before that actually happens, if not more, as you're saying, if that progesterone attenuation is starting earlier and earlier, if you're not, keeping on top of your labs, let's say. So all of those things that you've described are emotionality, it's our stress tolerance, it's sleep, it's all of these different things that don't have, they have obviously something to do with the menstrual cycle, but you're not going to see you're a 28-day kind of girl, it's not all of a sudden just going to drop and you're going to miss a period. And you're like, oh, oops, I just fell into it. It's like, it's a slow decline. We were talking about upward spiraling and downward spiraling. This is a slow slide down. It's a slow spiral. So you kind of have to be a little bit of a sleuth and really be having some kind of metric. Maybe it's, maybe you're wearing a Whoop, or you're wearing an Oura ring, or you have an 8, like you have something that's kind of, there it is. Oh, there you go. There's that Whoop. Yeah, I love that. And shout out to Kristen Holmes, who we love. So maybe there's some kind of wearable where you're like, oh yeah, like last year my HRV was like this, or last year it looked like this, or 6 months ago it looked like this.
Even tracking your menstrual cycle and your symptoms. I love tracking. I love data. I love Whoop. I love, I don't wear an Oura ring anymore. I love wearing a continuous glucose monitor, particularly because I believe that your blood glucose and insulin are the ultimate biomarkers of longevity and of your cellular energy, your good energy, as Dr. Casey Means loves to say. And so,
speaking of CGMs, co-founder of Levels,
yes,
right?
Co-founder of Levels.
Yeah.
So that data, but I think that the most accessible data that really allows us to bioharmonize with our body and really be aware of what is normal for me versus not normal. Like having a baseline is so important, and your menstrual cycle and understanding symptoms, tracking symptoms across your menstrual cycle can really bring about so many aha moments. Like, are you still having that estradiol peak on day 12? I always say that everybody wants day 12 us, everybody. And what happens when you start to lose that estradiol peak? Like, what does that feel like? All of a sudden your day 12 isn't feeling so shiny. Maybe in your mid 40s, or, what does it feel like after day 20 or 19, 20, 21, where you're supposed to have that progesterone peak? How are you feeling? For me, right after that progesterone peak, it feels like I fall off the cliff, unless I am supplementing with oral micronized progesterone. And so it was me tracking my symptoms across my cycle that I got such clarity about how to attune to my body and what my body needed. But that information for me was mission critical. It still is. I'm constantly, every day I'm tracking to see where I'm at. Like, I know that day 5 is when I turn a corner.
Right. Let's dive a little bit into the metabolical parameters for health and the tenets therein. You mentioned that you wear a CGM. I have, and I'm going to be just totally honest and transparent with you, I have like a love-hate relationship with CGMs, because on the one hand, I feel like, yes, it can give us so much information. Like my blood sugar spikes with avocados, and I was heartbroken to find this out.
Oh my gosh.
Anytime I have avocados, like my blood sugar would go up. And I was like, what in the hell is,
I don't know if I've ever seen that, Stephanie.
Yeah, I felt really betrayed. So
I would feel betrayed.
So it gives you it gives you this sort of like your bio-individual response, right? It's like, okay, so I know that with avocados, maybe I'm going to make sure I have it with roe, or I'm going to, whatever. I'm going to put something else with it, some protein or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's great. And I think like the Oura ring, like you mentioned that you don't wear the Oura ring, and maybe we'll talk about it offline or online, depending on how this goes. But sometimes I feel like you can like get these like orthorexic, like, oh my God, my blood sugar is like blah. And it's okay. If I wore my blood sugar monitor, and I have worn it while I'm exercising, it looks like I'm diabetic, right? Because you would expect
warrant,
that.
Oh yes, a blood sugar response.
But I have so many women who've like, oh my God, I have this blood sugar spike, and I'm working out. What's wrong? It's like, nothing's wrong. That's your body working properly. Mm-hmm. So I think that it can create, in some cases, not all, but in some cases it can create, how do I want to say this? Like, it just can create like being more scared of your body's normal response to things than is necessary. What do you think about that?
As I was listening to you, I thought, gosh, it's so critical to have the right mindset around using the type of technology, kind of like an Oura ring, like getting a bad body score on a Whoop strap. Like at some point you get enough bad scores, you're like, I'm over this. I'm
screw this damn ring.
Yeah,
I feel
not
great
this anymore.
Tell me that my readiness is 73 again. Yeah,
exactly.
Let's go.
Exactly.
I feel great.
So I know a lot of people who've like thrown their Oura rings across the room. They're just like, I'm done with this. And so I always speak into the mindset of what it's teaching me. And so even, I love wearing a CGM every quarter for accountability's sake, and just to kind of see, is anything shifted or changed? I know that as I get older, again, aging is happening over here on this track, and then hormones are declining on this track. These things are happening and
in tandem with each other.
In tandem, they're happening, in tandem together. It's not just aging by any means. And my family, I will tell you, almost every member of my family, besides my mom and I, have prediabetes and diabetes in the Mexican side of my family. And so it's something I want to keep my mind, and that's just my own individual family history. And, when I ran my genetics, that's the one kind of risk factor I got to keep my eye on is, higher than normal blood glucose.
Mexicans living in the US or Mexicans in Mexico?
No, in the US.
They're in the US. Okay.
No, everyone's in the US. Well,
yep.
The immediate family is. Everyone's in California, actually. It's where you'll find a lot of my family. And so those are the reasons why I keep an eye on it. And I do love it for accountability but I also understand the nuances of it as well. I know that it's going to go up when I'm working out. I know that it's going to, and so I know knowing these things, I don't respond to it in any way, but oh yeah, this is what happens. I keep an eye on those. But most importantly, what I'm looking at is, what's going to be the biggest, what's going to shift that CGM the most is going to be what you put in your body, the substrates that you put in your body in terms of food. And so even 2 weeks of wearing a continuous glucose monitor can give you a lot of insights about your body without having to wear it for many months on end. So I think that information can be invaluable. And I think, us being educated about how to use a continuous glucose monitor, how to decipher that information is very, very important. And I will tell you, one of the biggest insight I've gathered from it, besides obviously don't eat ultra processed food and added sugar, any desserts.
Avocados in my case.
Obviously avocado, sweet potatoes for me.
Yeah.
Sweet potatoes.
Yeah.
But liquid sugar, guaranteed. I always tell people if you want to keep your blood sugar stable, after a frappuccino or a milkshake or a gelato, it's walk with it. Walk while you're consuming it. That's how you're going to blunt some of that blood sugar response.
Yeah. And if you don't care what anybody thinks, lunge.
Or jump
lunge
squat.
with the frap. With the frap.
I have a video of my son and I. We were actually getting him ice cream at this really boutique-y, kind of bougie ice cream place because he's dairy free. And so they have this vegan coconut water strawberry ice cream. And so we were doing jump squats before I was doing jump squats. And Kingston always jumps in and does jump squats with me. And so I do a lot of jump squats. I usually do 3 sets of 20 jump squats after meals.
That's great.
Yeah. So the thing that I learned, the number one thing I've learned, especially if your blood sugar is pretty dialed already, you're pretty metabolically healthy, you're a part of the 7%, is moving throughout the day. Moving throughout the day, and especially after meals, if you want to keep your blood sugar happy, one, don't eat ultra processed foods. But number 2, if overall you're eating overall healthy, you're for the most part pretty healthy overall, and you're just in midlife, and these metabolic changes are happening without your permission, moving as much as possible throughout the day, for me is the greatest longevity hack that I know of.
Well, that's why we see, the little, if you go to New York City, you go to those little coffee shops and they're those little stands on the street. They're usually it's an old Greek woman or an old Italian, they are there and they're 400 years old and they're still able to serve you the coffee or whatever. And it's because they're moving all day long. They're standing, they're doing their little things. And, if you sort of pull that back to, maybe they were in Greece and or Italy and or Japan and all the other sort of areas where we see these centenarians and super centenarians, it's just they're literally just farming the hills, they're just moving all day long, which is kind of, it's such a simple thing, but it's so profound. There's really very few things that a walk, we were talking about rage before. It's you are mad at your husband, go for a walk. You're mad at your kids,
you're stressed,
go for a walk.
You're having a mood issue, go for a walk. You're feeling an energy slump, you want to attack your pantry, go for a walk. I mean, you're preparing for an amazing podcast interview with one of your besties, you go for a walk. I even walked 5 minutes prior to this interview before I put my dress on. So go for a walk. And then I do a lot of exercise snacks too. So I have 15-pound weights next to my desk. I literally cannot walk. I would trip over them. So in order, I have to walk over them. And so I bust out, I would say probably 6 to 7 times a day. I do my resistance training. I lift heavy weights. But I do exercise snacks. So I'll do jump squats with a 20-pound weight or a 15-pound weight. I'll do like 3 sets, and I will do that with mountain climbers or push-ups. So I'll do 2 minutes, 3 minutes of exercise snacks multiple times throughout the day to rev up my heart rate. But also, especially after a meal, let's say I can't get outside and walk, or I have a meeting that ended a little bit early, I'm in between meetings, I'll quickly just knock out, a 3-minute, basically a HIIT set, a high intensity training set real quick. Get my blood pumping, get my cardiovascular health going, and then, but also balance my blood glucose. I mean, I have noticed I've worn a CGM on and off for the past 3 years, and the more mini exercise snacks that I do, and the more that I'm walking throughout the day, I mean, my blood sugar is a chef's kiss. It doesn't go above 100 milligrams per deciliter.
And then, so I was going to ask you, like, what are the parameters that you like to see? So if you're eating, let's say, what's sort of the upper limit that you like to see in terms of glucose levels, if you're wearing a CGM, and then what's sort of the lower, again, what's the bottom of the range there as well?
So I'm looking for, and I've put CGMs on hundreds of women. So I've looked at a lot of CGM data, and then including myself, my own N of 1. And the parameters are the lowest I want to see. I want you within 70 milligrams per deciliter on the lower end. And I don't want it to go above 115 milligrams per deciliter on the upper end, 2 hours postprandial. So 2 hours post meal. And that would be the goal. The goal is to keep yourself between 115 and 70.
2 hours. So you want the blood sugar down to 115 mgs per deciliter, 2 hours post meal.
Or I'd say it doesn't go any higher than 115.
Oh, it doesn't go any higher.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's your peak.
Yeah, that's the peak.
And so what you'll see, whether it's the, Diabetes Association or the American Heart Association, they'll say 140 milligrams per deciliter. And I still think that that's just too high. That a blood sugar response post meal of 140 milligrams per deciliter is, particularly in women, it's a high enough blood glucose rise, especially if it's more than 30. Basically, if anything more than 30 milligrams per deciliter rise between where you were and where it goes. So let's say before lunch, you were at 100 milligrams per deciliter. Then you have lunch, you have a sandwich, or, and then it jumps up to 135 milligrams per deciliter. To me, that is a blood sugar spike. Mm-hmm. Anything above 30 milligrams per deciliter. And so, we get up to 140 milligrams per deciliter. We know for women, we are more sensitive. It may not be diabetes or prediabetes over time, but that's leading to inflammation in our vascular walls. That is leading to system-wide inflammation and definitely mitochondrial dysfunction over time.
So if you do have someone, let's say someone's listening and they're like, all right, I'm going to go get the Levels app. I'm going to get the thing. I'm going to get the Dexcom. I'm going to do whatever it is. And I'm going to wear the CGM. Mm-hmm. And they do notice that when they eat postprandial, it's 2 hours and maybe they're not quite back down to that 115, or they shoot right past it. It goes all the way up to like whatever it is, 140, 160, 200. What are some of the things? So you mentioned the 20 jump squats. You mentioned these little exercise snacks after a meal. Are there any, is it like, do we look at nutrient timing? Do we look at macros? Like, what are some of the things that we can do if we are looking to improve our metabolic health?
Yeah, the biggest lever, again, eradicating ultra processed foods, that Frappuccino guaranteed. I don't know anyone who's going to survive that. Like even the healthiest person, you're going to see a blood glucose rise.
You can squat it like it's hot, but your blood sugar is
I mean, you may be able to
blunt
it to some degree, even your bodybuilders, like they're going to see a pretty substantial glucose rise, even with a Frappuccino or an almond, like a vanilla latte or a pumpkin spice latte. If you're drinking liquid sugar, which is about 22% of our calories for the average adult, you're going to see that blood sugar spike. So the levers that I recommend pulling, one is breakfast sets the tone for the day. And if you end up on that blood sugar roller coaster because you're having a bagel with cream cheese, so refined carbs, and you're having an orange juice, and you are having a vanilla latte for breakfast, that when you are breaking your fast in the morning with a more refined carb and sugar-based meal, that doesn't necessarily feel that way. You get that blood sugar spike, you are automatically on that roller coaster. And so you're gonna experience a reactive hypoglycemic event, right? Where it's gonna go below that 70. It's gonna probably hit the 60s or 50s. And then your body, whether you love it or not, is going to sabotage you, and it's gonna send, you're gonna see leptin resistance. You're going to see, maybe a cortisol response, and you're going to get cravings. You hit that low blood sugar, and your body's going to want to rebound with something else. And so it's hard to get off the roller coaster once you get on it. And I will tell you, if you have a sugar laden breakfast, it could take over 36 hours to recover from that blood sugar spike at breakfast. Even if you eat metabolically healthy for the rest of the day, even if it's protein and veggies for lunch and dinner, it's still going to take over 36 hours for the average person to recover from that breakfast. So making that breakfast protein focused, fiber, healthy fats, basically keeping it blood sugar friendly is going to be the first thing to set you up for success.
So no frappuccinos, no frappuccinos for breakfast.
Or even just one squirt. Like I've tested this on women where they do, instead of the 4 squirts or 4 pumps of sugar in their coffee, you can do just one. Like you can modify even 1 pump of vanilla or pumpkin spice or whatever the heck they're putting in there, because it's the first thing you're eating that day. Your body's going to respond. Like unless you are squatting it out for like 10 minutes
for the next 36 hours. If you want to be squatting for 36 hours, have your frappuccino, ladies.
Yes. So I just want
I have a question for you about milk.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, oat milk. Yay or nay? Is this something that should be banned? I agree.
Banned. It's banned. There's nothing healthy about oat milk. Like one, it's so highly processed. It's impossible.
It's also not milk. It's also not milk. Okay.
And the amount of gums and preservatives and additives, like it just disrupts the gut. But I have never seen someone not have a blood sugar rise or spike on almond. Get an almond milk an oat milk, even an unsweetened oat milk matcha or an oat milk, cappuccino. You're going to see a blood sugar spike.
Can we just do regular milk? Is that okay? Can we do
if you can tolerate dairy? Yes, you can absolutely.
I tolerate dairy. So I just want a regular thing. I put a picture of my cappuccino because I had just come home from travel. And I was like, oh, it's so nice to have like my, cappuccino. And so I had someone reach out and she's like, what kind of milk do you use? I'm like, just plain, the regular old boring stuff that we've been drinking.
I would say grass fed. I'd make sure your milk is hormone free, grass fed, if you're going to drink. But cream. Milk, if you can tolerate it, a really great organic grass-fed cream or just regular milk is great. Again, we are really mindful about the type of almond milk we consume in our house. But one of my favorite coffee shops they make their own almond milk, but they sweeten it to some degree. And I remember, you're talking about love-hate relationship with your continuous glucose monitor. I was like, do I even want to know? Do I want to know what happens if my favorite like boutique coffee shop is down the street? It's called Lofty Coffee. If they sweeten their almond milk, because it's almost imperceptible, because I really can't do sweet anything. But I had a CGM on for my 45th birthday because I was like, I'm heading into 45. Like I want to see where I'm at with everything. And girl, it spiked my blood sugar. I was oh man, I was so bummed.
I feel like I've been called out. I feel like I've been wronged.
I've been wronged. Yeah. Yes. It's so breakfast and then sleep. I mean, goodness knows. I know it's elusive. Again, like your stress tolerance, it just kind of flutters out the window in the middle of perimenopause. And we can talk about some things to do, but man, sleep alone. I mean, if you want prediabetes, do 5 hours of sleep 5 to 6 days in a row. Or less, and you will be not only have pretty severe insulin resistance, but pretty much be in the blood sugar range of prediabetes. So that's how serious it can become. And the question is always, are those late night snacks affecting your sleep? Is your sleep affecting your blood glucose? So it's always, you got to kind of sift out those variables and find out. But sleep will really, and what we know too is if you are averaging 5 hours of sleep per night or maybe 6 hours of sleep per night, you're going to make it up with calories. I think we on average will eat like 15% more calories if we're not getting 7 hours of sleep at night. So you're going to make up that energy somewhere. It's usually going to come from food.
I think I read somewhere that for every extra hour that a woman gets, she's like 13% more interested in sex. You got no sleep. You got nothing in the tank. Sex is an energetic process. Okay. You're like, I don't got energy for that. So sleep is a big one as well. And then again, probably the other one, again, besides
being, not eating the big offenders is movement throughout the day. So example, I had a birthday for my birthday this year. We threw a birthday party, and the day of, I'm just literally an assistant to my own birthday party. You know how it goes. So like I bought this beautiful gluten-free, dairy-free cacao cake for my friends. I didn't have any of it. But the next day, finally, there was a couple pieces left, and I decided I was going to do a little experiment. So I had the cake, and then I had it after. So what I did is I blood sugar stacked. First, I had a very protein-rich meal, a dinner. So I had 45 grams of protein. It was salmon, a big salad, roasted broccoli. And then right after dinner, like within about 10 minutes, we had the cake. And then within 5 minutes after the cake, 5 to 10 minutes, because the sun was setting, my birthday's in September. So the sun's still out, still kind of in the later in the evening. We got on it. We did a bike ride. We did a 25-minute bike ride. And what I wanted to know is, would my blood sugar stay within my optimal range? And I watched it for 2.5 hours, and it did. It didn't go above 108 milligrams per deciliter. So I got to have my cake and eat it too.
That's so great.
And it was fun. I was gamifying it. The ride was gorgeous. We got to the beach. My son had an amazing, it was just super sweet. And so it wasn't like I'm like, oh my God, I have to go work out really hard after this piece of cake or my blood sugar is going to blow up. No, it was this beautiful evening. The bike ride was so pretty and beautiful. And so I really got to pleasure stack and blood sugar stack my blood sugar. And the cake was amazing, by the way.
That's amazing. I love to hear that. And in terms of the sleep, you mentioned, sleep as one of the metabolic regulators. This is one of the big three that I find that a lot of women complain about in perimenopause anyway. So what are some, and this might go into the bioidenticals, but how can we want to like set up, what are some of your tenets for good sleep hygiene? And then we can maybe talk about bioidenticals if none of those things are working. Like if someone's like, I'm doing all the things, doc, like what next? Like I'm doing all the, like the room is cold and dark, like all those things. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's skip to the good part now.
I just skip to the end. So I will say just a little, after my post-concussion situation, sleep since then, and it's probably a yes and, it's perimenopause and post-concussion syndrome, but sleep will make or break everything. It'll make or break me the whole day. Like if I want to function, and I really need 8+ hours. And so I have a wicked sleep routine. I always tell people, treat your sleep like it's $1 million meeting. Like if you ain't coming to me with $1 million question or $1 million meeting, then go away. Like do not mess with my routine. And I think like how we manage stress and it's really how we manage sleep, like intentionally, or vice versa. Like treat, if you're having these big symptoms, be intentional about managing them. Be intentional about managing your blood glucose. Be intentional about moving your body. Be intentional. So I treat every single one of these habits like they're $1 million moments for me. And so we have a pretty solid sleep routine. One of the things growing up, my world wasn't safe. There was no safety. There was no routine. Things were just chaos. And so one of the things I wanted to instill for my son to ensure, like, how do I ensure my son feels safe? And there's a lot of things that we do. But one of the things that I'm really big on is making sure my son knows what's going to happen next. Like we routine it up. And I mean, is there room for flourish and fun and spontaneity? Absolutely. But man, it is dinner, play, bath, PJs, toothbrush, reading. Girl, it is clockwork. And we kick it off at like 7:00. You know what I'm saying? So, and I think about how that's what we need. So the second I get my son to sleep, I am immediately kicking off my sleep routine and I anchor it with supplementation. So I take my magnesium, I'll take my omegas, and depending on what's going on with me, if I was treating my brain injury for a long time, I had a protocol, like I was even taking omegas before bed, but I have my supplement routine before bed. I get my water, I get my electrolyte water ready. And then I also put some essential oils on. Like after I wash my face, brush my teeth, I put some lavender on. So everything is ritual and routine for me. And I anchor it to physical activity, meaning I take the supplements, I wash my face, brush my teeth, I put the oils on, and then I head in. The lights in my house are dim. They're amber lit across the house. There's no room once it's nighttime that is bright light that's going to kind of bring in that extra blue light. So we set up the house to be ready for that. We temperature regulate. All the rooms in my house have blackout curtains, especially the bedrooms, obviously, my son included. And so it's super dark. So all of those things have been done ahead of time that we kind of just built into the routine. But more so, I feel like I have to seduce myself to sleep. You know, like I got to wine and dine, except no wine at all. Like I got to, you back in the day when you're like your 20s and your early 30s, like you could just run into bed. Like, no, there's none of that anymore. So if I am taking bioidentical progesterone, that's a part of my supplement routine. I will take that about an hour before bed. And then I give myself a full hour in bed. If I want to be asleep by 10, I am in bed at 9. If I want to be asleep by 9:30, I'm in bed by 8:30. That means right after I get my son's been asleep, you know? And so I will, after all of, like, once I'm in bed, it's either reading or it's a meditation or it's journaling, but it's no phone. It's no looking at any screens. And so I really just kind of ensure that I'm doing a wind down. And I try to go to bed at the same time every night. And I wake up no matter what, whether I went to bed a little bit extra later, I get up in the morning at the same time every single morning within a 15-minute window. So usually it's 6 or 6:15 is my window. And I'm consistent. And then I am in sunlight, getting natural light on my eyes for at least 5 minutes within the hour after being awake. So I find that that sleep hygiene and those rituals and treating those rituals like they're $1 million meeting has been not only a saving grace for myself, but so many women that I've worked with.
Yeah, I think that there's something to be said about the transition to bed, right? So there's like the frenetic energy and the busyness of the mundane that we were talking about at the top of our conversation, and then having a transition, just like a season, like fall is a transition, you know, it's a transitional season from summer to winter. And I think having that transition from the day to the evening with like the washing of your face and the essential oils and, you know, dimming the lights and all these sort of cues is really great. And I think even for children too, I can't remember if it was a TED Talk. I can't remember. She was a child psychologist, and she was saying that for so many children, the scariest time of day, or what most parents struggle with, is getting their children to sleep because they're going unconscious. And it's scary to do that. It's scary to go unconscious. So you need to feel safe. Like, to your point, you have very honestly and transparently shared about your own feelings when you were younger, when there was clearly maltreatment in your life where you didn't feel safe, right? So you didn't feel safe in your own home, maybe in your own body. And then of course that transition that has to happen where you go from conscious to unconscious. So it's such a beautiful, you know, maybe full circle to give that, you know, to be able to give that to your son. And also just recognizing that humans have difficulty with transition, like children have it. And then adults in perimenopause, when we're seeing this hormonal flux, our difficulty with transition requires a little bit of extra love, in the same way that you're not yelling at Kingston, you're not yelling at your son to go to sleep. It's like, God, it's like 15 minutes past the time. Like, what the hell? You know, we're not doing that with our children. We're also not going to do that with ourselves. Like, how can we be gentle with ourselves? And you found a routine that really works beautifully for you, which is lovely.
Yeah. Yeah. And I try to, again, I just take it, I'll take it very seriously. I know how mission critical sleep is for me. And so I really want to honor my body and honor the transition to allow my body to feel relaxed and de-stressed enough for sleep. I mean, I could easily stay up and do things. I could easily finish emails. I could easily fold the extra laundry, you know, get more dishes into the dish, whatever it may be. Like, there's always things to do, but I treat sleep like it's equally as important as any other really mission critical task that I'm doing in the day. If anything, more important than some things, for sure.
And let's just assume that our Betties that are listening are doing all of that. They're like, I have a transition. I'm doing the oils. I'm doing the gua sha. I have them, you know, all the lights are off. You know, you mentioned that you're taking progesterone, or oral micronized progesterone, which, by the way, standard of care, that is the standard of care, is the oral micronized version of it. Before we got started recording today, I think I said Progestin, and you're like, there's never a time for Progestin. So let's talk about the difference between oral progesterone and Progestin, the difference between the two. And then I have questions about, are you taking it constantly? Are you cycling it with yourself? I have all those questions that I know that everybody wants to know as well. So let's first delineate between synthetic and not synthetic.
Absolutely. So oral micronized progesterone, or bioidentical progesterone, or, however, there's a lot of different ways to say it, it's still made in the lab. So just know that it's plant derived, but
they're not picking it in a field.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, technically they are. It's plant derived, and then it's synthetically.
Okay. All right. You got me.
Okay.
Yep.
But it's not like coming from us, right? But it's body identical. Meaning that it's exactly how it looks, exactly molecular structure as the progesterone that we make inside of our body. So it's binding to the receptor sites that progesterone would be binding to throughout the body and throughout the brain, right? Progesterone is a neurosteroid as well, which is so profound. That's why when we start to lose progesterone, we see those initial symptoms that are not related to your menstrual cycle. And then progestins are a synthetic progesterone, and actually kind of look more like testosterone than they do look like progesterone. Progestins are what you're going to find in birth control. They're what you're going to find in the Mirena IUD. They're what you're going to find in some hormone replacement therapy. They were the hormone. They were what was used in the Women's Health Initiative, MPA. So progestins they don't have a lot of neuroprotection, and they definitely won't necessarily mitigate a lot of the neurological issues that women are struggling with in perimenopause. Now, your doctors don't always know the difference, because a lot of the languaging in research articles vacillate between progestins and progesterone. So doctors sometimes won't know that they are giving you a progestin-only medication. So it's really important when you are talking to your doctor about perimenopausal symptoms, and note that standard of care in the US is to give you birth control, is to give you progestins. Whether it's the mini pill or it's the IUD, that's a progestin, but they may tell you that they're giving you progesterone. So again, just the reason why I want to delineate or kind of distinguish between the two is that there's a lot of confusion even in the medical system, whether you're being given oral micronized progesterone, so the real deal, the real bioidentical progesterone, which is called Prometrium in the US, or you're being given a progestin.
Yeah. And the progestin has, we can go down the laundry list of downward spirals that can happen from progestin.
It's an endocrine disruptor.
Yes. It's an endocrine disruptor. We will often see lipids go awry. Mm-hmm. We'll see it gobble, it's almost like it gobbles up CoQ10, like all these different things.
It'll nutrient deplete you, vitamin B, magnesium. It messes with your microbiome, but particularly it also has side effects around mood and brain related issues. And so what I will see kind of if women, and often the reason why women are put on progestins is one, just perimenopause. Like, let's just get you on the pill. Let's get you on an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety medication and call it a day. And so, that's what doctors have been told to prescribe. So, but usually women want, there's still a possibility of pregnancy, at least throughout early perimenopause. It get a little bit more challenging in late perimenopause, but it's kind of like knocking out multiple birds with one stone. Okay, well, you're not going to get pregnant, so here's contraception. It's going to manage what crawls up my skin is when they tell me I hear that it's going to regulate your period. I was like, you mean it's going to turn it off? So I always hear that. That's always it's going to regulate your period during perimenopause. No, it's not.
Define regulate.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Yeah,
You run your hormones when you're on a mini pill, like a progestin-only pill or a combination pill or the IUD, and they're not there. They're not going to show up on the labs because they're not there. That's the whole point of what contraception is. It's meant to shut off your ovulatory cycle, because that's what it is. It's an ovulatory cycle, right? And so women will still come in. Yes, maybe the heavy bleeding is being managed. The irregular weird periods are being managed because, again, you shut it off. So that's definitely what's going to happen. But a lot of women will still experience a lot of brain-related symptoms. And so what may happen, what may be recommended after that or given to you is then like 100 milligrams of oral micronized progesterone. So now you're on a Progestin and progesterone in perimenopause, where I'm really of the mindset of, I mean, if your cycles are so erratic and the bleeding is so out of control, I mean, an IUD, probably the lesser of the evils, is I get it. But if we're trying to manage the neuroendocrine transition, being on real progesterone, real bioidentical progesterone, I feel like is the real way to go.
Yeah, because that's when you're going to upregulate the GABA, like the
you're going to actually get the benefits.
Yeah.
The neuroprotection, the reducing inflammation. Yeah, upregulating GABA. Progesterone is phenomenal. It's very much brain food. Not as much as estradiol is. Like, she is literally Houston. She's the CEO of the brain. She's the master regulator. But we can't dismiss the benefits of progesterone on the brain as well.
And you mentioned 100 milligrams.
That's usually the standard dose. Yeah.
Standard dose. And then have you, just as a point of interest, a little bit of just coming back to the migraines for a moment, have you found that progesterone helps with the migraines? You probably might need a little bit more than 100.
Yeah, I know. I cycle mine. So I rhythmically cycle progesterone, mainly because I really need a little bit more progesterone than 100 milligrams. And what I was finding is if I maintain 200 to 300 milligrams of oral micronized progesterone all the way to the end of my cycle, I mean, kick me off a cliff. Because I would just go from 300 or 200 milligrams and then I would just plummet. Right. And so what I'll do is I usually the first 5 or 6 days of the luteal phase, I'm on 100 and then I go up to 2. And I really, again, around day 22 is, I could kill somebody. Like, I got rage. Like, it's not day 27 for me or day 26 or 5. It is 21 or 22. And so I have learned from my own chemistry, that's when I need to go up. And usually I'll go all the way up to 300 milligrams for a couple of days and then taper back down to 2. And then usually a couple of days prior to my period, I'm back down to 100 milligrams and then I stop and that initiates my period. Now, I will say that there are days you ask me, do I work my calendar, my podcast calendar or work calendar around my cycle? And unfortunately, it doesn't work out that way. But if I see that I have a really heavy couple of days heading into my period, I will take progesterone for a couple more days. I'll let her I'll basically push my period out until I can get through those 2 days or whatever, how long it is. I usually never push it out longer than 2 days. And then I will stop taking the progesterone to initiate my period.
And I think you have the benefit of, so you're taking it from, let's say, the day you ovulate, which is somewhere around 12, 13, 14. If you ovulate, you're just taking,
I take it no matter what, but I am tracking whether I ovulate or not. And I'm not ovulating all the time.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's interesting to know. And then are you okay, this may be TMI and we can cut this out.
I'm down to share.
We can totally cut this out. Is it like cervical mucus that you're looking at? Are you looking at basal body temperature?
Both, all of it. I'm looking at all of it. I think, again, the more data points, the better. So I'll know if I'm potentially like that I have a better chance of ovulation with the cervical mucus. I'm like, all right, girl, look at that. And, and then, and then I'll be tracking my basal temperature as well. And if I see that little bump up, that 0.5 degree, then I'm like, ooh, mama ovulated. And sometimes I can feel it. Yeah. And so, but here's the thing, I get the migraine either way, so most cycles I'll get the migraine, on day 13, day 14. I usually ovulate day 12, when you look at my cycle. So usually the day after quote unquote ovulation, whether I ovulate or not, I'm probably going to get the migraine, but it also signals when to start taking that progesterone. And let me tell you, she is a godsend for me. Like, progesterone will make or break my stress resilience, my irritability, my ability to be a great mom. Like, I absolutely need to supplement with progesterone at this point in my perimenopausal journey.
That's fantastic. And there are some people that take progesterone all
the time
long.
Oh, yes. And throughout the day, you don't have to just take it at night. Mm-hmm. So sometimes if I'm really struggling, I'll take 100 milligrams during the day and then I'll take another 100 or 200 milligrams before bed.
And it doesn't make you sleepy.
100 milligrams usually won't do it. 200 will. So especially if women want to use it for sleep, you may find your doctor just gave you 100 because that's the standard dosage and it's just not cutting it. I say go up to 200 and see how you do, and see if that helps to initiate sleep, because it is a sedative. But 100 usually no problem, especially if anxiety, anxiousness, panic attacks, that kind of stuff is coming up for you, especially in the luteal phase of your cycle, consider, breaking it apart, taking it, maybe take it in the morning if you find you're more anxious in the morning, or maybe in the afternoon, and then take it again at night. So you can play with it throughout the day to see how you do. Some women also use, they'll keep their oral micronized progesterone in the evening for the sleep aspect and really calming the system down. But they'll use a topical, like a cream or a serum throughout the day to kind of just keep the edge off. So maybe you can get kind of creative with it.
These are really great tips. And I don't think we've actually ever talked about the practical application of it like this on the show before. Yeah. So this is really awesome. So you mentioned that you're also on, is it estradiol or estriol?
Estradiol. Okay. Oh no,
so,
I want the queen bee. Yeah. Give it to me straight. The CEO of the brain hormone. I want her on board.
And when did you start taking that and how are you taking it?
I started taking it earlier this year, mainly to mitigate migraines. So I had been taking oral micronized progesterone since my concussion, since last summer, mainly initially to help reduce the level of inflammation that I was dealing with and to help heal my brain. So, and I actually took it continuously. You were asking about that. Some women take it continuously. And ideally, if you ask my clinical opinion, if you can cycle it for as long as you can. And again, you have a lot of camps right now in terms of hormone replacement therapy. You've got the camp where you should be rhythmically cycling progesterone until you die. And then you have the other camp of, okay, no more periods. We are done with this. Let's continuously take it every single day. And I mean, some women do phenomenally cycling it, especially in perimenopause, where, we still have the cycle. We want to honor that cycle for as long as possible. We want to honor that ovarian longevity, as long as possible. But then I know women who cycle it postmenopause, and it's phenomenal cycling it postmenopause. I know other women who, if they don't take it every single night, they can't function. So I think you got to find out where you land. I'm not going to take one position over the other. Currently, right now, I cycle it. I have taken it continuously to heal my brain, and I have been so grateful. But yeah, did my period go away? Absolutely. I didn't have a period. I didn't have a period anymore, and it took me a couple of months to get it back online once I started cycling it again.
Yeah. Okay. So estradiol.
Yeah. Okay.
How are you taking it? How much are you taking? Give us the goods.
So I am also cycling estradiol. So I have a patch and a cream. So I do a steady. So I have 0.05 dosage. It's the standard patch that you're going to be given, typically in menopause or postmenopause. But I do believe that women in perimenopause, especially the symptoms dictate, and obviously testing too. I think bringing it on the earlier side.
I think the clinical symptoms are king. Or queen, really. I think certainly labs. I think labs, you need to have some type of baseline for labs, but I think you really should be, and this is where the art of hormone therapy really is. It's there's no real standard. You just kind of have to play with it for the person.
Especially for perimenopause. The one thing I can promise is that talk about a transition time of change. Even with hormone replacement therapy, if you're using oral micronized progesterone in early peri, it's going to probably look different than how you're using it in late perimenopause in terms of dosage and maybe even application. And so especially estradiol, there's a lot of discussion about when to bring on estradiol. I would say clinical symptoms is when. And usually for a lot of women, that's going to be mid to late perimenopause. But especially if oral micronized progesterone in that luteal phase isn't cutting it, and you're even noticing some pretty severe symptoms during your period or those first 5 days, it's probably you're just not rebounding. You're not seeing that estradiol rebound that you were accustomed to for decades. And so for me, symptoms really presented themselves, and oral micronized progesterone wasn't doing it. I was dialing the lifestyle. My metabolic labs looked great. My blood sugar was amazing. My sleep, I was clocking, 100% efficiency there. And so I was like, okay, what else is it? What other lever can I pull at this point that can address these estrogen-driven migraines? These brain changes, this lack of resilience, this horrible energy. Why do I not feel amazing in the follicular phase of my cycle? Give me my 10 days back. You know what I'm saying? So that's where I was like, if I only get 10 to 12 days out of the month where I'm supposed to feel amazing in perimenopause, well then what do I got to do to maintain those 12 days? And so I wear the patch consistently throughout the month, and then I'll use a cream to bump it up on that day 12. So as I'm ramping up, I will use a little bit more estradiol to kind of mimic the rhythmic nature of estrogen in the follicular phase of my cycle.
Okay, so I was just with Vonda Wright this past weekend, and she changed my mind on estrogen for the face. She was like,
estrogen cream.
Yeah, she was like, start on estrogen cream right now and your skin will never have to deteriorate. And I was like, oh my God, why? I mean, why didn't I think of that before? I was like, hitting myself. So now my thing, like, I really love skincare, all the things skincare. So now I'm going to find an estrogen cream, and it's not systemic. It's very local. And
it's very local.
There was also another conversation about vaginal cream for like dryness, and even just Kelly Casperson was on the show and she was saying that 50 to 80% of women see like vulvovaginal atrophy in perimenopause and menopause, and like you have clitoral atrophy, and I'm like, are you telling me a nightmare? Like, this is not the story I want to hear about.
100% of women will have genital urinary symptoms, whether it is vaginal dryness or painful intercourse, or it is UTIs, or it is, atrophy. So yes, a vaginal estrogen, please. And I usually don't recommend vaginal cream for the face, or vaginal cream, oh my God, estradiol cream for the face. You can see I didn't put enough estrogen on or in my system, but not until like mid-perimenopause, like when we really kind of know we're not making it, because estrogen, it's in early peri, she is still there. She's still showing up. She's still doing her thing. But as you start to, and you'll notice, like you'll start to see the changes happening probably mid-40s where you're just like, what is going on with my face? And that is a time to bring on, obviously the sunscreen and wearing hats, please. But also, I have an estradiol cream for my face too.
But also, Kelly was saying, you can use the vaginal estrogen cream on your face.
You can.
So she was like, unofficially, I'm not saying that you should do this, but you can take a little extra and rub it. And I was like, oh girl, that's such a good idea.
Because it is a low dose, and it's a lower dose. The actual estradiol facial creams is a lower dose than the vaginal estradiol. But there are creams specifically for the face. So if you're like, oh my, I can't even, and plus you may think to yourself, like, do I really want to waste my vaginal cream on my face? Like, so there are facial creams. There's a lot of different companies that are coming out with these. But again, if you still have if you're a 30-year-old, you don't need estrogen cream on your face. But if you're a 45-year-old, you absolutely do. Consider it.
100. Well, this is my new thing. I'm like, okay, now I was talking to a doctor who was she was in the same city as me. She traveled down to come to the event. And I was like, all right, I'm going to come and see you now. And now we're going to do this like estradiol thing for the face, because that's another lever that I'm going to be adding to my routine. And just coming back to cervical fluid for a moment. Why not? One of the things like that you are able, what we know certainly is that our cervical fluid changes with time. It used to, like your vagina, like the cervical fluid, it used to be a Cardi B song.
Yeah, no, it's not. It ain't what it was anymore.
It used to be a swimming pool down there, right? It used to be very juicy. Exactly. It's like a Cardi B song. And now, it's like you have to really watch for some of those. So that also is another indicator as well. If you are someone who is looking at their cervical fluid over the course of their cycle, where you're like, oh, it's not as like kind of juicy and sticky, and there's not as much stuff in my underwear.
Then robust. It's not as robust as
juicy, robust. We don't have as much robust fluid in there. So that might also be a clinical sign that your estrogen levels are dropping.
Yes, absolutely. Or you're definitely experiencing more anovulatory cycles, and that, it's time to be really tracking your cycle, tracking, again, not just symptoms, but what you were used to. What was your baseline of cervical fluid? What was your baseline of how you felt at ovulation? Again, that's how we really begin to notice, are we getting that robust estradiol peak? If all of a sudden you're feeling lackluster on day 12, and you're doing the math on your age, again, it's worth looking at, kind of match up any of these other symptoms around a loss of estradiol. Like all of a sudden the belly weight's happening, the sleep issues are happening, you're feeling more anxious, you're feeling more depressed. Again, these are all symptoms of lower levels of estradiol.
Yeah. And I would also think, if we're looking at skin, it's like your skin's going to be flaky and dry, right?
Yeah. I started to see skin changes, and I will say I just did a little reel with my mama a couple weeks ago, and she's 64. I'm 45, she's 64. And now everyone's like, oh my God, that cannot be your mama, because how she looks at 64. So I've always been like, genetics are on my side, but still I started to see some changes in the last year, and I was like, oh. And I started grilling my mama. I was like, okay, so when did you start doing this?
That's awesome.
I won't say what the things are.
Yeah. we want to keep it PG for all the kids in the car that are listening on their morning ride. Okay, I want to ask you about testosterone. I want to know your thoughts on testosterone. Are you taking it? Do you think it's good for women, bad for women? And yes, thoughts on T.
Yes, I'm not yet taking it. Not yet. But I'm sure it'll be coming into play for me. My testosterone levels are still pretty robust. Thank goodness. But I am a full body yes to all the tools in the toolbox as soon as you need them. And I think for many of us, that is perimenopause. That is the intervention window, is to bring on the interventions, is during this beautiful window where we've been told we don't need anything. I'm like, bring it all. So I'm a big fan, not only for confidence, for motivation. I mean, testosterone is a build you up hormone, like growth hormone. I want to be built up. I want my confidence to be built up. I want my stamina to be built up. I want my power and strength. But most importantly, I want my brain to feel like it's firing on all cylinders. And so testosterone is amazing for that. Again, not a lot of research for us as women, like even particularly in perimenopause in general, you'll see a lot of the research is really post-menopause. And so, we're luckily starting to see more and more research coming out for women in perimenopause. But yeah, if your levels are low, please consider it. Please be testing, particularly sex hormone binding globulin, looking at total testosterone, looking at free testosterone. So looking at all those numbers and seeing where you're at and bringing it on if necessary. I'm not a fan of pellets by any means. No, thank you. It's mostly compounded creams that I would be recommending.
Okay. And I think that there's something to be said, like we've been talking about, things that you're using right now in perimenopause. And this idea, there's more and more literature coming out and more practitioners and clinicians who are actively seeing patients talking about this idea of, I think that actually getting on hormones, if you are a candidate for them, can mitigate some of the risks that happen in that postmenopausal time, like the cardiovascular risk that we see, the cerebrovascular risk that we see, and then even just like the vulvovaginal atrophy and the GSM and the menopausal, or what is Vonda? The musculoskeletal syndrome of menopause, like all these different things. So getting on some of these hormones, caveat, if you are a candidate for them.
Most of us are.
Yes. Yeah. And I've had people on the podcast who are breast cancer survivors, who are clinicians, who are breast cancer survivors, and are like, there's no reason why you can't at least have the conversation. Like, all we're asking for is that all women be given the opportunity to have this conversation without being told that A, it's going to give you breast cancer, or B, you're not a candidate because they're using, let's say, outdated information.
Absolutely. Yeah. You deserve the conversation. It's a very nuanced conversation. And I will say that hormones, when I talk about them, they are optimizers. Like, you're not going to out hormone your insulin resistance. And you know what I'm saying? Or a sedentary lifestyle, or really, really crappy sleep. But they are, I will tell you, you will have a light bulb or lights on moment. I'm also not a fan of doctors or practitioners or health coaches saying that you need to do all the lifestyle interventions before you should be allowed to use hormone replacement therapy. What if someone is struggling so much that they just can't, implement some of those strategies, and then you give them some hormones, and we deserve wins. We deserve quick wins. We deserve as many wins as we can get. And so if estradiol and progesterone brings you back to life, brings you back to function, so that you can be moving your body and getting the sleep that you need and helping to regulate your metabolic health. And I am a full body yes to all of that. Like, whatever helps you manage this transition and creates more resilience for you in postmenopause, I am a full body yes. And for me, navigating, I will say that I am one of the, I don't want to call it the unlucky ones, but man, my symptoms have been profound. And I watched my mom go through peri, and it was pretty intense. And I thought, God, please don't let that come for me. And here we are. And so I have a lot of tools in my toolbox that I'm constantly implementing, and it's day by day. Some days I'm taking it day by day, but I'm implementing the hormones. I'm implementing the lifestyle. I'm implementing therapy, energy work, breath work, meditation. I mean, name it. Whatever is going to help me navigate this time and that I come out on the other side more resilient, I'm willing to do all of it. No alcohol. I mean, whatever it takes, I'm in it. And again, some days are better than others, and some days are going to be better than others for all of us. And as long as you've got your tools in your toolbox and the things that you can lean on to get you through those moments, whether it's book besties or it's voice memos to your soul sisters or whatever it's got to be, like you have those things in place for yourself so that you can get through your days. Yeah, I mean, yes, a couple of days ago, I'm working on a new book, as you know, and I'm on my manuscript and I'm barely my heads up. I'm just, because a lot of book writing is research. And I'm just researching. And I can barely keep my head up. And I'm just like, I got to get through this chapter. And it was an exercise chapter. And I was like, I better go do some exercise snacks.
Oh, the irony. Yes.
And so I knocked out 3 different exercise snacks over the next 2 hours that I had to write because I was like, I got to get through this. And so I was so grateful for that tool to lean on in that moment where easily I could have said, well, I don't have energy for that. But I was like, that was the thing that was going to get me out of the hole. Mm-hmm. And so that's really what I want to emphasize is that we do have a lot of tools at our beck and call to lean into. And as much, you just got to really keep assessing and keep checking in with yourself, keep doing the body scans and then implementing those lifestyle strategies. I mean, that's what's going to get us through this period, this profound period, what I call the reckoning.
The reckoning. I love that. This has been such a delight. Of course, anytime, like I said, that I get to spend time with you is time well invested. If people want to pop over to your podcast or learn more about you, your journey, your work, where can we find you?
Yes. So the podcast is one of my favorite places to play, just like I know it is for you. It's called Energized with Dr. Mariza. I wanted to encompass what so many of us desire, and that's more energy. So Energized with Dr. Mariza. And then on Instagram, it's at Dr. Mariza. And so it's really geared around metabolic health and perimenopause health. I have a lot of funny. So you want to be entertained about the symptoms that you're dealing with. Like I'm going to be real about it, but also, giving you a lot of lifestyle strategies to help mitigate what you're going through. Like that is, I just want you to know that I am here with you every step of the way. I'm in it. I'm in it to win it with you.
I love that. And that edutainment part of it is always fun. I always enjoy seeing the memes that you put out with perimenopause as well. So I'll make sure that those are all linked in the show notes. Dr. Mariza, it's always such a pleasure. Thank you so much for spending this time with us today.
Thanks, honey.